as life givers and first responders is the title of this panel, but like, what does that really mean for us, and how do we embody that responsibility and those roles, and what the history of that has been for our people historically, pre-colonization and during colonization, and in this time of, I would not call it post-colonization, because we are still in a process of colonization now, but this process of the revitalization and the re-emergence of Indigenous women as leaders in our community and as holding up that role and responsibility of women as life givers and first responders. So I'm really, really excited to be a part of this panel and bring it to life and really honor and welcome these speakers. So the best way to do that is to let them have a little brief introduction of what brought you here today? Who are you, and what is the work that you're doing? And if we could just go down the line, and then I have some compelling questions that I will ask you afterwards.
Lulik Pukaila, Utu Yachinas Ibidas, Tenamtupam Wintu. My name is Sage LaPena, and I'm Namtupam Wintu from Mount Shasta area, the headwaters of the Trinity River. So how did I get here today? I started my herbal training when I was about 8, and I am one of 7 children. And so I really feel that, I was raised a lot more by my sisters than by my mother, and then spent a lifetime going to ceremony with my family and with my tribe and neighboring tribes. And then as I became an adult, I was asked to start teaching at the California School of Herbal Studies, and I asked why. I didn't know what an herbalist was. They told me I was an herbalist. I thought everybody had this knowledge that to me was intrinsic and daily, and that, it's something that was a lifelong journey. And so at that point, I did go back and start teaching at the California School of Herbal Studies, and then also went to school to become a papered clinical herbalist in both Western and traditional Native American herbal studies is what I also teach. So I'm currently a practitioner at a health clinic where I see patients full-time. And I had gone to many other health clinics across the United States and to some CDC conferences, and found out that there are no herbalists that work full-time in an Indian health clinic. There are very few herbalists even that come in as a consultation basis. So it is unprecedented to have someone such as myself being a traditional herbalist in the standard medical profession and working with the MAs and PAs and MDs on a daily basis. So I'm here for my community. I continue to do what I do for my community, and the generations that have passed and left with me, caretaking of certain pieces of knowledge of our people to help the coming generations and those who are at this time battling those battles of seeking wellness and balance within themselves.
Wanakisak, Natasuis Danielle, Ka Running Water, Nutomas Masipiat Wampanaak, Katapatanamu Wachiwami Awasak. My name is Danielle. I'm also known as Running Water, and I'm from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe of Massachusetts. I am not sick. I am under attack, okay? And I apologize that something is trying to take away my voice at a time where I am supposed to be heard. Last week I was at my husband's family's medicine dances in Wisconsin, and it was very emotional. And I feel like I absorbed some energies there. And I look at my body as being a microcosm of the earth, and so I feel like the waters and the oceans inside of me are just trying to flush something out. And so I apologize if I have to blow my nose. but I'm just working with whatever is flowing out of me. I am a mother. I am a student midwife. I am a spouse. I am a woman. I am a life giver. And very briefly, what brought me to this journey, because I have a bachelor's and a master's. I used to do grant writing, and I was involved in economic development, and I worked for my tribe as a planner, and that was all really great, but it felt like I wasn't paying attention to my calling. And I was really brought to a moment where my unfulfillment was so great that I decided that I should really sit down and think about what helps me stay alive and stay motivated and what inspires me. And that was essentially my femininity and my womanhood. And the Mashpee Wampanoag community is a matriarchal community, and we are very proud and we uphold our women and the status of the women. We're very vocal and prominent in our government, in our culture, in our clan mother system. And so I felt like that was something I naturally knew and did, and decided that that's where I should look, so I can continue to grow and evolve as a Native woman.
Hey young, Cutcha, Risling, Baldy, Ahoye, Kyunyai an Afte, Kina, Afte, Kusne, Afte, Natinaway, Afte. So I'm Dr. Cutcha, Risling, Baldy. I am Hupa Yarkan Karuk, enrolled in the Hupa Valley tribe in Northern California. I'm also currently the Department Chair of Native American Studies at Humboldt State University, and the Executive Director for a nonprofit called the Native Women's Collective, and we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. The work that I do is actually on the revitalization of women's coming-of-age ceremonies, especially those in California. I wrote a book about it. And the book really was a product of the work that I was doing with people in my community, because we didn't do our women's coming-of-age ceremonies for a long time, not in the same way that we used to. Colonization, when it came in, really targeted our women, and especially the fact that we celebrated women, that we thought that women should be in positions of power, that we treated them equally, that we believed in feminism, that all genders should be treated equally. And this went against a colonizer's culture where women were considered more like property. And so because of that, they saw our women's ceremonies and the things that our women could do, and they really targeted them for eradication. And they made it very dangerous for us to practice them. And they would target the women that we would celebrate at this time, because usually we celebrate a young woman after she started menstruating. And so we have a ceremony for her to tell her that we believe that menstruation is very powerful and represents a time when a woman is at her most powerful and her highest ability to connect with and to speak with sort of higher selves. And so that way of looking at menstruation felt very foreign to people who were coming here. And they decided that they needed to stop that, but they also needed to make sure that they put our women in their place, because then they knew that they could take apart the rest of our culture if they took apart our women. So for about, in some tribes, like 150 years, in other tribes, 50 to 60 years, we didn't do women's ceremonies, not publicly. And then about, 17 years ago, groups of people in my community got together to work to bring this ceremony back, to revitalize it. And the thing that I opened the book with is actually my story of how I started doing this as a project that I wanted to write about, because I knew that for a lot of years, it was not us who were writing the stories of who we are as Native people, and it wasn't us that was writing the record of what ceremony is and why it's important. And when I knew that this revitalization was happening, I knew that I didn't want somebody else from outside to write what we were doing or to document what was happening. I wanted us to document what we were doing. So I interviewed all of the girls who have done the ceremony in the first 10 years of the revitalization so that they could speak to why this is so important and so that they could talk about what the impact is that it's had on their lives and in their communities and things that have changed with us as like adults and then also men and young men because of us doing this type of work. Myself, I was 12 when I started menstruating, and I have to go talk about the book a lot now, so I talk about my first menstruation a lot. I talk about menstruation in general a lot, which is about anybody. I have no shame. You can ask me any question you want. I'll tell you all about it. I've had to do all kinds of research. One time this Uber driver picked me up, and she was like, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I have to go talk about my book." She said, "What it's about?" So I told her, and then she goes, "Do you want to hear about my first menstruation?" And I was like, "I do." Like, why not, right? Like, why are we afraid to tell that story? That's important. And so I started doing all this work because I was 12 when I started menstruating, and my mom took me out to dinner to celebrate at the fanciest restaurant that we have in our tiny little town. And our waiter's name was Gary, and I know that because he came up and he said, "Hi, my name is Gary. Are we celebrating anything today?" And I was like, she's gonna say something. And I was giving her this look, and she said, "No, we're just a mom and daughter out to dinner." And at that dinner, she said to me, "You know, Cutcha, we would have done a dance for you right now. We would have celebrated you. We would have told the whole community how important you are. We would have made it obvious that this is very important and brought you through this, but we don't do that anymore. And I know we haven't done it in a long time, but if you want me to, I will find a way to do it for you right now." And I looked at her and I was like, "Ew, Mom, gross. I don't ever want to do that." And I told her no. So she let it go. And then a number of years later, I was living in San Diego, and I was in an abusive relationship with a man, and it was becoming very obvious that if I stayed, he was probably going to kill me. And I wasn't telling anybody. I was hiding it. And I wouldn't open up to anyone about what was going on. And one day after a fight, he left me on the bathroom floor. And I picked up the phone and I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm gonna leave him." And she said, "I think you're making the right decision." And I said, "No, Mom, he's right. I'm nothing. And I'll be nothing without him." And she paused for like a really long time, and then she said, "Cutcha, we should have danced for you." And it was kind of in that moment that she made this decision. She was like, "What is wrong with this culture that they teach our girls that they are nothing? What is happening that they teach our girls that they don't belong, that they aren't somebody? And we have to do that for them." That's what this dance was for, to teach them that they are somebody to us. So she decided she was gonna make it happen. And I don't like to tell anybody like I had some kind of awakening. I did get myself off the bathroom floor. My grandma always told me, if you don't know what to do, you sing a song and then you'll get up and you'll go do what you're supposed to do. And I've always told people, like, you find out what's really important to you when you have to leave a situation very quickly. And I didn't know when he was gonna come home, so I got up off the bathroom floor and I was singing this song, the only one that I had, which was a flower dance song. It was a woman's song. And I packed, and I had to pack very quickly, and I only packed my Sex and the City DVDs and my computer. And then I left. But I kept coming back because people do that. But every time I went back, there was some woman that came into my life that took me out. And that is what my mom was always saying that this dance gives to our young women, was those women that will always be there to take them out or to help them or to lift them up. And so the book is really about like why we lost that, but also why it's so important that we're getting that back. And I think when I think about women as life givers, I don't just think about the women that birthed you. I think about all the other women that are in your life that are giving you life every chance that they get. Like they're giving you breath, and they're giving you song, and they're giving you opportunity, and they're always, always going to be there. And in our tribe, we call them the Seven Sisters. It's based on the Big Dipper. But I think you have that. And so I don't think women are just life givers because we give birth. I don't think we're powerful because we give birth. I think we're powerful, and we give birth, and we give life. So thank you.
What we have here is we have these three amazing women, a herbalist practitioner, a midwife, and a writer. And they all hold these very, empowering and beautiful roles in our communities. And they come with it from a different approach when we think of an herbalist, a midwife, or a writer, because they bring along with it their Indigenous identities and the roles and responsibility of what it means to be a woman in those roles. And so when we think about this panel, that this is about, first responders, and the fact that in many times we are the first responders to environmental and social threats to our community well-beings. So from everything from understanding the food and the medicines that we put into our bodies, how we bring life into this world, and how we share stories to empower each other, to lift each other up. For women, supporting women, to revitalizing and reimagining the futures post, it's not post-colonization. I don't know what to call this era sometimes, but 500 years post-first contact. And we really need to think about what it means for what we lost, but what we're now building together as women in our communities. So I really wanted to start with some really basic questions around what was it or what is it that drives you to do the work that you do? So beyond that story that you just shared, which is so powerful and personal, what is it that gets you up every day to continue to do the work, to bring the different aspects of your work into your communities as a life giver, as a first responder? What is that motivation? And if you want to just take the microphone, we don't have to go in order. I'm all about, chaos is order.
So yes, we're not in post-colonialism at all. All of my patients are dealing with PTSD, trauma. Every single one of us in this room is dealing with trauma. For myself, through not wanting trauma to continue in my family, I wanted to have my babies at home, which I had most of my babies at home. And when I first told my family I'm going to have my children at home, they were like, oh gosh, we have our kids in the hospital, it's safer there, there's all these ways and means of protection and, the sanitariness of it at all. And so whatever, you guys. And I went and talked to my grandmother. And she said, well, isn't that where your baby was made? I mean... so your baby already knows the sights and the smells and the sounds of that space. The hospital's a foreign place. So because of my, youth and so forth, and so I read all these books on midwifery, and I was going to be my own midwife. And no matter what was going to happen, I was going to stay at home, and I was going to do this thing. And really it's because I was stubborn, right? And, I was still running with the Aimster gangsters and all this kind of stuff. So that's what I did. I had my babies at home and felt that was the right thing to do. And not everybody has that opportunity. You are the first environment. You are that space of the darkness and the water. And you are born of water. And when you come out, you are water. And you become an earthling. And then you see all those traumas, all that history that's part of who we are as human beings that's been put down upon us mostly by patriarchy, mostly by men. And when we're separated from our sacred space of home and being brought out, all these mechanisms and chemicals and contraptions and so forth, we deserve the right to know that we are strong enough and sacred enough beings, that we're not extinct, obviously, so we've been birthing at home for thousands of years. And that right of that knowledge had been stifled and oppressed and suppressed and taken away from us, so that we had lost some of that confidence of who we are to be able to do those things. It is our right to know we are sacred beings and we have the strength to do these things at home in our own way that suits us best. If we are unable to do so, it is still our right to choose. And so I continue every day with what I do, because we are unraveling that thought that we do not know these things about the self. We know how to eat. We know how to breathe. We know how to live. And that information and knowledge was set aside like, oh, you have to go ask them. Go ask your doctor. Go ask these people. Go ask the professor. Go ask the priest. Go ask the person in the white jacket. Go ask the person with the piece of paper, because they are the ones who know. And it's just not true. You have that knowledge within you of where you come from the stars and from those dark waters. So although I am in where I can reach the people, we talk about those things in the practice of what it is we're putting in our bodies and how it is we're living on a daily to get through some of those traumas. And so there's all those generations and all that unraveling that needs to take place. So that's what motivates me, because it is my father's fathers that have been through boarding school, my father himself in boarding school, and that information taken. So it is our right of that knowledge, of confidence of self, that we are sacred.
So I'll share with you a story of how I began my journey. And usually when I don't have an answer or I'm seeking some sort of clarity, I always go out into nature. And I know that time and again, it will come to me through just observation of just our plant and animal brothers and sisters. And even when I don't know that I need to know something, nature will show me in its own way. And so I had a dog, and she was like my animal spirit, as many of you who are dog lovers, like these beings come into our lives and they just love us and we love them. And she was pregnant, and I cared for her and loved her and was so in awe, because many of us grow up sort of far removed from that observation of animals in their own sort of day-to-day, and usually dogs and cats are what we're able to get close to. So this was something I'd never seen before, and the time came, when she was about to give birth, and I set up all the pillows, and I had a little space for her, and I gave her water, and all these things, that I just was trying to do. But she didn't need any of that, and that was great. She pushed aside the pillows, and she kind of made her own space, and and I was just there, and I just felt useless, but I was really mesmerized by the fact that she had never done this before. I'm not a dog. No one's teaching her. It's just this innate ability that has come out, and it's just instinctual. She just knows what to do. Something is activated inside of her that tells her exactly what to do, and she's responding to her body, and she just knows. And that to me was fascinating, because I was like, oh my God, if she can do this, then I can do this. And I had never even thought about birth at the time. Children wasn't even in my near future. I didn't even have a boyfriend. I was just but the fact was that I saw something that happens in nature. I'm a part of nature, and it inspired me to be okay, when the time comes, I'm doing it this way. And so She had 4 beautiful puppies. She licked them all, ate her sack, like all that. And so I just stored that, and then I moved on. And when the time came and I became pregnant, and this is my 3rd, so this was a few years ago. When the time came for my first pregnancy, I did my research and I looked into natural home births, and I wanted to eat my placenta, and I wanted to be home, and I wanted to be in my bed, like just like how she was doing it. You know, she brought in life, not in a vet, not in a institution, not with a, she just did it. And probably if she wasn't in my home, she'd be out and made a beautiful nest in the woods. And that was something I even wanted to do, like just be out in nature and just in the elements. But so that was something that inspired me. And I had an at-home water birth with my daughter. And I specifically wanted and invited the water element to be there. Water, I love water. We're from the East Coast. We have a special relationship with water. And I know that I needed that. I needed her to be there to comfort me in a time that I knew pain would be there. And the water was so soothing and amazing. And I always, anytime I talk about birth, I always really encourage young women and just women in general, like, please consider a water birth. Like, it's just transformational to be in water, to come from water, to have the baby coming out of the water of you entering in a gentle way into this world. And so I also, I had different, I had sage, and I cleansed my space, and I only wanted just a few people there, just 2 people. And I really felt empowered in the sense that I was creating my own space. I was protecting this spirit that was coming in, and I wasn't subjecting myself to an environment outside of my control, like in a hospital, for example. And that was very important to me. And I know that a lot of women go through unnecessary traumas because of their environment and because of the people who are around them, because of the strangers that are around them, because of the changing shifts, because of the bright lights, because of the stress, because of all of these extra added elements that are just unnecessary and may stress us out. And so that's something that is also very important and motivates me to educate and encourage women to take back their birthing space, take back their birthing plan, and know that whatever you envision, you can actually make it into a reality. And you don't have to be swayed by outside forces that say, you have to do this, and you have to go here, and you have to have your birth here, and a hospital, that's what you have to do, and insurance covers it, and that's where you go. And, it's like, no, I don't have to do any of that. My body is capable, and if you're in good health and you can have an at-home birth, or if you can have a midwife, you should absolutely do it. And there's nothing to fear. That was the other thing that my dog taught me, was that, pain is there. It's nothing to run from. It's a part of life. You use your pain for your strength. And clearly, this animal probably had a level of pain, but she wasn't yelping or crying or barking, and she sort of took it and used it through her contractions and pushed out this life. And so a lot of women I notice that I talk to are afraid of the pain, and that invites unnecessary interventions, and that numbs you from the experience of having this life go through you and come out of you. And it disconnects you to a certain level with that experience when you numb yourself. And so that's something to think about. Our world is so careful and sanitary, and we're always trying to protect one another and our babies from pain. But sometimes, and I think in the birthing process, it's extremely necessary. So as a student midwife, it's my first year. I'm also an Indigenous breastfeeding peer counselor and a doula. And it's as soon as I, shared my experience, because my mom was there like videotaping with my cousins and my family, everybody was like in our tribal community, like, people still give birth at home? Like, what? Like, Danielle gave in the living room? Like, they were just like, what? Because it's something that just that has not happened in a really long time. But it was very inspiring, and about 3 or 4 women after me have had their births at home. And they have invited in the Mashpee Wampanoag cultural ways. They've invited in spiritual leaders. They've transformed their space into a culturally relevant, safe, protected environment that brings in our babies and our tribal children. And that is like something that's what motivates me, because those first few breaths, that first moment, that golden hour of just being in peace and having the women around you or the men around you that you love to encourage you to either breastfeed or just to encourage you to just relax in your own environment. And, you might have your music, or you might have the foods that you want to have right afterwards, something home cooked from, a family member or whatever. That is like really important, and that sets the tone for the rest of the child's life. And when we share those stories, and I'm excited to one day share my story with my daughter about how she was brought into the world, that adds in that special element of that care that we give to our babies and our children, and that they are special, and that we're taking them back, and we're not giving them away to the institutions, and they're not, being cared for right after by a nurse or a doctor or someone foreign. They're staying within our community and within our family, and they're right at home. So that's what motivates me every day. Thank you.
So mine is my daughter. My daughter's 12, which means some days she hates me, and the rest of the time she just thinks I'm kind of annoying. And I think that I remember being 12, and I remember how much I did not like my mother. And I remember, my daughter and I just had like a really big thing happen between us, and I called my mom, and she said, "Don't worry, Cutcha, you became a decent person again around 21. And I was like, oh man, that's a really long time. Because I remember when she was little, and we were just like best friends, and I couldn't do anything wrong. But what I always tell people about her is, so she's 12 now, but because we've been doing this dance for a little over 15 years, she doesn't know that we just don't do this. Like in her life, this is just who we are as Hoopa people. We just celebrate women on their first menstruation. That's what we do. And young girls come to my parents' house. And when I started when I had my first period, my mom made me call my dad on the phone, and I was like, "Hi, Dad, I started my period." And he goes, "Okay." And he was like, "Yay?" Like he didn't quite know what to do with that information. But now girls come to our house, and they say to my dad, because they want my mom to help them plan their dance, he says, "What are you doing here?" And they go, "Well, I started menstruating." And he goes, "Congratulations! You get to have a flower dance." And that's his just first response. So it has really changed how we approach these things. And in her lifetime, this is just who we are. And as I see that happening for her, I realize how important it has been, this work, because what we know about our culture right now, through scientific studies, et cetera, is that at puberty, a young woman's self-esteem plummets. And this is across the board for anybody. But a boy's remains the same or increases. So whatever we're doing, it teaches young girls that there's something wrong with them. And when we talk about puberty, and in the studies, they always say it's at puberty. At puberty, young girls have their self-esteem plummet. They never say when they start menstruating, and it's really around menstruation. So I know that it matters how we teach during this period of time, what we say to our young women. So this period of time is so important for what we teach our young people about how they're supposed to be in this world, and we teach it in this very sterile, really awful way that somehow they internalize something bad is about to happen to me, and I'm not proud of it. And then we send them off into the world, and these girls have to figure out a way to recover from that. And it doesn't happen in your everyday life. You don't have big celebrations of menstruation on television. Now, studies also show it's very simple to fix this. All you have to do is share with young women your experiences of puberty and what it was like and tell them your story. It's that simple. You just have to talk about it. So in this dance, that's what we do. We bring her, we sing, we dance over her, we celebrate her, we tell the whole community she's important. But during the day, we do talking circles. We visit with her. We show her all her community members that love her. We teach her about how to take care of herself. We teach her about herbs. We teach her about steaming. We teach her about bathing. We teach her about language. We actually have a conversation with her about domestic violence. We teach her about the cycle of violence. This is traditional to our ceremony. We have a story that is about frog women and Coyote beating up frog women. And then we have a conversation with a girl at 11, 12, and 13 about what you do, who do you go to, what happens, what are the questions you want to know about. And at the end of that story, it ends with Frog. Coyote beats her up again, and he goes to get her. He's like going to go down and grab onto her, and she looks at him, and she says, no. And then she says, my back is like blue stone. And that's, in Hoopa way, we say the blue stone is the hardest stone you can be. It's the toughest material we know. What she's telling Coyote is, you're not going to do this anymore. My back is like blue stone. I'm too strong for you. And I didn't know how important that was until I was at a conference with my daughter. But we did go to this one conference together, and she was making pottery with them. That was one of their things that you could do at the conference. And she made me a little bowl that actually sits on my desk because they had these tiny blue stones. She put them around the outside of this bowl, and then she wrote on the top, my back is like blue stone. So this is why. It's because of that. And we give that to every girl that comes through with us. And we know it makes a difference. We know that it's changed everything. And so I don't think it's hard for us to continue anymore just because we know that's what we're supposed to do. It's what we've been doing since the beginning of time.
And so I was thinking about, as you guys were all talking, there was a story, the story that was weaved through all three of the motivations that you've brought is this idea of like autonomy, self-determination, the sovereignty over our bodies, the sovereignty and the self-determination of the choices that we make and how we move through the world. And the underlying narrative that has taken that away is colonization and the imposition of patriarchy into our own communities. I come from, I'm Dene or Dene Sotlene from Northern Canada. We are a matriarchal community, but we lost all of our women's songs, our women's ceremonies. And I see how patriarchy still manifests in our own communities, and that the impacts of colonization aren't simply about, patriarchy as its own institution outside. So I would love to hear around how does patriarchy and colonization continue to impact and show itself in our communities? And why is it so important that we continue to do the work that you are all doing in our communities? Big question, just a little question.
I want to be like, who's about to spill some tea?
I'll start. So, although we are a matriarchal community, in the individual lives, it's apparent that patriarchy and that mindset is still evident in the woman who has displayed that sometimes she has to get permission or approval from her spouse over decisions that strictly involve just her body. And I don't think that's something that just only exists in my tribal community. It's something that us as women deal with every day from different communities all over. But I think the most important part is being inclusive of men, but also knowing that you have full autonomy over your body regardless of the circumstance. How to exercise that, though, is difficult because there's a lot of fear around actually rising up and having a voice and reclaiming your identity and your power. And I think that we just have to keep chipping away and just keep showing up and just keep being present and just keep demanding certain standards that we want. In terms of the birthing world, we have to be really vocal with our treatment in institutions like the hospital or even in birthing centers. We have to have our birthing plans. Unfortunately, we have to be prepared, and we have to kind of think 2 steps ahead because I feel like we're always under attack. But yeah, I don't know. I just want to say our community and our women and our clans mothers are really present, and they do a pretty good job at helping the young women just remember who they are. And just those talking circles help strengthen the female voice that may lie dormant. Just that community of women, that support there has to be there. And if you're not part of a tribal community, there's many women and allies that you can go to just to seek some sort of validation or just to help you with the struggles that you're going through. But I don't know. Patriarchy's tough, and it's disguised in so many different ways, and you don't even know sometimes that what it is you're up against is patriarchy until you're forced to exert your matriarchy. I don't know, but that's what I got.
The mitochondrial DNA runs through the woman, right? It doesn't matter if we think we're a patriarchal community or not, or the sayers of the things of how we're supposed to live. We are matriarchal. Earth is, and as she said today earlier in the keynote, we have a pulse, and Earth has a pulse. We are not disconnected that way. There is no disconnect. So all of us participate in matriarchy. And when we consider that thread more, then we make it so. We can participate in a different way all the while. Because when we right, you can focus on the things you hate. You can focus on all those, processes and positions that be. But you can come from your own perception of that place and make it so that you are empowered as a human being. So yes, we all know patriarchy plays so many different roles, including as a wage earner on Earth. But when we look, where do all these humans come from? They come from women. And if you look worldwide, even our food, there are more farms that are run by women worldwide. Women create the food, they create the humans. And there is this false sense of control by men and patriarchy, by rules that are made. The land is the law. The land is matriarchal. And our birth and our death and our cycles of the moon in our menstrual cycle, that bleeding in connection to the moon, that cycle is the feminine. that water that is within all of us is the feminine. So we have much more connection as beings to matriarchy, as earth beings, as humans.
I just want to say, like, patriarchy is not traditional. Patriarchy is not sustainable. Patriarchy is not justice. If you are doing environmental justice and you don't have a analysis of patriarchy and the environmental justice that you do, then it's not justice. If you're doing reproductive justice and you don't think about patriarchy, it's not reproductive justice. It has nothing to do with any type of sustainability. You can't sustain patriarchy. At a point, it will fall apart in and of itself, and then it will do everything it can to maintain its power. It'll do it through movies and stories and television and presidencies. It'll do everything it can to hold on to itself because it knows that it doesn't make any sense. Like, it literally doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But I always like to acknowledge, like, patriarchy is instilled here because it is a system that was trying to replicate itself, and that it constantly challenges our own memories of what it means to be an Indigenous person in this world. And that we need to be the ones to say that that's not who we are. And I have a lot of experiences with patriarchy in my life, but I have even more experiences of Indigenous feminisms from every person, gender that I have encountered, understanding that patriarchy is a real tenuous way to build any society. It's not going to work. It really is not going to work. We will figure that, like, at some point we're all going to look around and be like, why is this still not working? Oh, patriarchy, that's why. And you know who knew that? The Cherokee. The Cherokee came to the table to negotiate their treaty with the fledgling, at the time, United States. And the Cherokee brought women. And they sat the women down at the table, and they were like, you're going to talk to our women. That's who you talk to. And the colonists were like, we don't talk to women. We don't even let women in the room. And the Cherokee chief stood up, and he was like, where are your women? And they said, oh, we don't let women be involved in this. And they said, that's why this is never going to work. That's why you all are not going to be around that long, because you need your women. So to me, it's almost like, I know sometimes I feel this way. I want young people who are doing this work in their communities with their cultures to know this. You are not the only one that sees it and thinks this is not the way it's supposed to be. But it does suck to always be the person to speak up, because then they start labeling you and telling you that's just your education, that's just your feminism. And at a point, my great-grandfather, he was like, yeah, I'm a feminist. Because why wouldn't we be? Who doesn't like the idea of the equality of all genders? Like, get on board, right? And I think I do this work a lot, and then I go do talks, and all the time I will have people stand up, and they'll be like, that's real nice, you're doing stuff for all your women, but, like, what are you doing for the men? What about the men? And I'll be like, yeah, you should do that. I can't solve every problem. But also, you want to know, and I have this answer, I go, you want to know what we do for young men in our communities? Flower dances. Women's coming-of-age ceremonies. Because for 5, 7, or 10 days, we ask young men to come to a space where they are not the center of the universe. And we tell them, you are not the center of the universe. And I think that's a really important lesson for them to learn. And we say, your job is to be in service of this young woman. And I think that's an important lesson for them to learn. And then in the end, what my mom says, in the book, she talks about this, and she says, when you have danced for a girl and sung over her and worked with her and brought her wood and seen her come out as a woman, you can no longer think of her as an object. You cannot objectify her anymore. And that's what we do for our young men. We center our young women so that for a minute they can go like, in this world exists a space where I'm not the center of the universe. And I think that's something that we need to constantly push back against. I love that we are doing that for young men. I love that when they come and listen to me talk, all of them afterwards will come and say to me, like, I really enjoy listening to you talk, but none of them are like, except about the gross period stuff. They're just like, about everything. They share with me in that experience. I think breaking down those barriers are really important.
I just love to hear these different stories and your understandings of how patriarchy has shown up in our communities. And I just really want to point out that Indigenous peoples are very diverse. I'm from Northern Canada, just below the Arctic Circle. We have Eastern, we have local to California, and there's all the people in between and here and there and across the globe. And so we have sometimes profoundly different worldviews and ideas around the roles of women. But there's one thing that I feel is that we share amongst ourselves, and it's this core grounding of ceremony. And so no matter the differences of our Indigenous peoples, that there are ceremonies that help ground our communities and ground our people in their roles and responsibilities. And so when we think of the title of this panel, Women as Life Givers and First Responders, and the work that you are all particularly embedded in your communities, what is the role of ceremony in helping to reestablish and reemerge the role of women in our communities, and why is it so important that ceremony become a critical part of your work?
The first ceremony each and every person in this room participated in was the birth of themselves. It brings community together. All of these processes of remembering where we come from as sacred beings. Every ceremony that takes place, no matter what time of year, is a way of remembering those things. We commune together in ceremony. We participate with each other. We see each other. My children are ages 11 through 32 years old. They've all been to puberty ceremonies. Who are now men, I see the way they treat their partners. I see the way they treat their wives and their children, their communities. I know they have participated in those ceremonies. They are different than when we see people out on the street who have not participated in those. Because they know these songs, these connections to places on earth and how we interact with our elders and the sacredness of the food and the stories that go along with hunting and the changing of the seasons, and all of those things add up to what is our life, our reality. That this life is a gift, and our first ceremony is that birthing. And the remembrance of ceremony is in that coming of age ceremony, to remind, and when we're at this age where we're running around so much and you're taking those moments, right? Every time you bleed is a ceremony. Changing from monarch and going through your life and birthing and the process of how you feed yourself and how you feed your baby and, taking care of your elders. Those are all ceremonial moments. But participating in those individual ceremonies, learning the songs of the land, are all ways to be reflective and come back together again, to be reminded of those things. Ceremony is one word that means a million things. It includes the stars, the earthworms, the blades of grass. But the first ceremony is, the communing with the mother. That birthing process is ceremony.
We used to have so many ceremonies, and it's unfortunate that they are lost, but the beauty in just humanity is that we can always recreate ceremonies. We can always recreate the significance of certain events using modern times and modern technology. So sometimes for tribes, we are reluctant to create new ceremonies because it's like, oh, that's not traditional. But it's really necessary to create new ceremonies because that helps with the evolution of the tribal culture. And, you know, in our Western culture, you know, birthdays are ceremonies, funerals are ceremonies. Like, we still celebrate ceremonies in different ways every day. And the beauty of ceremony is that for the mind and the memory, it's really an acting out through symbolism that embeds information either in a significant time that's either a beginning or an ending. And so it's really important, and it's one of the easiest ways to remember instructions as well, is through a ceremony. Oh, well, in ceremony we do this, and this pot over here symbolizes this, and we bring in this element and that symbolizes that. And we, you know, we have to fast for 4 days because of the 4 directions and because of, you know, so it's, you can just include so much information in ceremonies. And so our tribe understands the value. Our tribe is experiencing life without ceremony. And now we're like, we need ceremony. Like, people need to be healed. And Western society is not cutting it. People are sick. And we have to do it in our own ways. And so, you know, we have this idea that illness or disease or sickness can be cured through medicine that is prescribed to you from a doctor. But we also know to be true that those ills are also spiritual imbalances that can only be healed through ceremony. And so many of our people are suffering. And we're like, how do we help you? And the answer is, let's collectively recreate a healing ceremony for the men, for the women, for the girls, whatever is happening. And so that is the conversation that many of us younger folks are having now, because we're not afraid to address these things head on. And we realize that, you know, there was a gap in time and we're without. And we still want to live our traditional ways, so let's just recreate it. So what we have been doing is we've been fixing up our men's lodges and our women's lodges. And so we have weetus, which are small homes. They're bark covered with cedar poles, and they're in the shape of the womb. And that's where we go to sweat. That's where we go to purge. That's where we go just to be together. And just that small symbolism of entering into a sacred space that is our own, that reconnects us back, that is made of just organic earth materials, is powerful enough for people to keep coming back and to feel like they're allowed to show their weaknesses, or they're allowed to share their hurts. And so and that's just the small, like, foundation of a ceremony. Then you can keep adding on. Well, let's all go during the time of the full moon, or let's all go during the solstices. Let's then bring this, or, you know, let's go at X time of day. So then the community can create ceremony by signifying what it is important, that is important to them, based on the elements and what's going on around them. And so it's like healing is sometimes mind over matter, and then sometimes it is the actual entities working on us and through us. But you have to combine both the imagination, which was brought up this morning, as well as the practical, tangible things of the earth. And then those things combined with the belief is what creates the ceremony and the significance for us to hold on to and keep within us day to day, year after year, and then it's like, oh, I did that ceremony, I feel great. And it could be something small and insignificant, or it could be really robust, and it could be a ceremony that has lasted generations and generations, that has all of these beautiful details inside of it. And so it's like, I just want to say, if you're part of a tribal community or not, create ceremony in your own life. Have your healing rituals, have your self-care ceremony as a woman, have your men's time. I mean, my husband, he jokes, but he doesn't joke, but it's like he's on his moon sometimes and he needs a ceremony. Like, you go off and you do your thing because you're going through something. You're also a part of the earth, and things are moving through you as times and seasons and days change. And you might have to act things out or purge. Like, create your own little ceremony. Like, help yourself, like, get your guys together and your support together. And so ceremony can happen on so many different levels. And I think it's really beautiful for all of us to bring it back in our own ways as individuals and as collective entities.
In Hupaway, we say that before the time of people, there was the time of animals, and before that, there was the time of our first people. That's who we call our Kihenai. Our ceremonies were given to us by the Kihenai people to help us to keep the earth in balance. And they tell this story about how in the before time, in our valley, which is where we say that we came into being, a dark cloud came and it settled over us, and it was blocking out the light, and it was causing disease and destruction, floods and problems with the earth, and all the kinds of things I think that we would identify now as like environmental issues. It was keeping us from being able to grow food, and the Kihenai came and they said, we have to do something to push this cloud away. So what we'll do is these ceremonies. And if we do them, we can push the cloud out, we can rebalance the earth, and we can have new days. And they told Hupa people, if you do this, then the cloud won't come back to settle over you. But if a cloud comes again, you do this, and you'll be able to push it out. And that, to me, is decolonization. We have everything that we've ever needed to be able to do this. They gave it to us at the beginning of time. They told us our responsibility was to honor the earth through our ceremonies, and that if we did that, everything would be okay. And it was hard to do that because they outlawed them. Colonizers outlawed them, would target them for spaces where they would come and take our women and children, would target them for massacres, would target them when we were in those spaces to round us up. It became dangerous to do those things. That's how much they knew how powerful they were, because they had to try to stop them. If they didn't think they did anything, they wouldn't try to stop them. But they knew that we were doing something, and they were afraid of that power. And we have done them ever since. And in Hoopa, we're fortunate enough, we're on our Aboriginal territory. So we have done these things unbroken since the beginning of time. And when I started doing this work, I remember a lot of people kept telling me, but you lost the flower dance, you lost this women's ceremony. And I never really liked that. I was like, I lost it? And I kept telling people, we didn't lose it. It got violently wrested away from us. That's different. We didn't just go, oops, I don't know where it went, misplaced it somewhere, should have put a little thing on it so it would ding when it moved around or whatever. It was taken from us on purpose. But the more work I did, the more I realized. So in Hupaway, we have 3 ceremonies that we do in the all-time dancing place. They call it the Chitilye Winte thing, the always dancing place. One is the jump dance, and then the other is the deerskin dance. Those are what they call our world renewal ceremonies. We've done those unbroken since the beginning of time. You will sometimes hear the jump dance referred to as the Thanksgiving dance. That is because when the fort came in, they were like, you can't do ceremonies anymore. But we were not going to stop them. So we kept doing them, and then they came, and they were like, we told you not to do ceremonies. And then we were like, no, that's a Thanksgiving dance. We're celebrating Thanksgiving. And then they were like, oh, okay, got it. So they let us keep that one. So you see how we were doing whatever we could to hold on to this because we had been told this is what was going to push that dark cloud away. Now, the third dance that's done for all time in the Kehenai afterworld is the flower dance, the women's ceremony. So to me, that shows how important it was. It was one of our 3 world renewal ceremonies. You had to do this to make the world in balance. You also had to have the women's ceremony. But when I was doing the research, what I realized is like, we can't lose it. It can never be lost because it's being done right now. Like it's just up there, it's waiting for us. So all we had to do was ask it to come back. All we had to do was say, we want it, and call it back, and then it came. And it all happened the way, like, I wish I could say it wasn't that way, but really what happened is groups of women started going, I want to do this, I want to do this, and then things just came. Suddenly we were like in the archives and we found things we had never seen before. We were in museums and saw things we'd never seen before. We were talking to elders and they remembered things that they didn't even know were in their brain. They just remembered suddenly, I remember this thing about this dance because we asked for it. So I know that ceremony exists in and of itself in a world that needs us to help rebalance it, because what our ceremonies do is connect us to this place in a way that reminds us that we need to be humble to the earth. Like, we are not the owners of it. We are not the people who are supposed to decide exactly what happens. We are the people who work with it, right? We're like a part of it. So what I love about our ceremonies then is they are adaptable to who we are today and what we need today as much as they were yesterday. They weren't meant to be like rote actions of things. They were supposed to be things that we did to help in the world that we had right now. And we can do that right now. And we as Native people, our imaginations are there to help us to make those things come back into being. And all we have to do is ask for it. And the Kehenai will take care of the rest. And I do all of these interviews, and then one time this guy leaned forward and he asked me, and he was like, well, what do you do when Hoopa culture is lost? And I was like, I don't like the premise of the question, man. But I said, I've actually asked this question to my elders before. I said to my grandpa, I was like, Grandpa, what do you do when Hoopa culture is lost? And he looked at me and said, go find it.
I just love these stories that are being told here around the importance of all the different work that you all do. And I've been reading a book by Lee Maracle. She's a Canadian Indigenous woman. She talks a lot about feminism and the role of women, Indigenous feminisms and the role of women. But she had this one chapter about appropriation, and I just thought it was relevant here. Because she talked about a lot of times our stories get taken by people and then shared out into the world. And as women, a lot of the time it's our responsibility and roles to hold those stories to help bring and restore the balance to our communities. And it's really important that those stories, while we're sharing them here, that they belong to these individuals, that these women, to their communities, and that they hold significant roles in not just being women, but as their role and responsibility as life givers and as first responders to the imbalances that we're seeing in our own communities. And it's really critical and vital that we support our Indigenous women to maintain those positions of first responders, of life givers, and all of the responsibilities that come with that come from the work that these individual women have put into not finding, but remembering those roles and responsibilities and helping our communities to find that balance. From the foods and the medicines we put into our bodies, to the way in which we bring our children into the world, until how we find those things that were taken from us and how we share them and bring our communities into these spaces. These are such powerful and intricate stories that really embody what it means to be an Indigenous woman on the front line of our own communities.